Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. So the onX Hunt app has basically replaced my need to carry a GPS in the field at just about any time. So I've relied on my phone to do this, and one of the biggest things that, I had a concern with for the first few years of carrying both, and, everyone else that I've heard their complaint is, what happens when your phone battery gets drained because of it. So what you can do is you can actually download these maps ahead of time through their offline feature, and once you download these maps to your phone, you can turn it onto airplane mode and run your phone as a GPS without you trying to search for signal in areas that you don't have cell signal. So that will really extend the life of your battery, and actually your phone will probably run longer than a standard GPS would on batteries from that standpoint. So it's very useful to utilize that offline feature. Download those maps when you have Wi-Fi, when you have service ahead of time, and you'll be in a lot better place. To check out the Hunt app, you can go to onxmaps.com and use the code EMW to save yourself 20% off the premium and elite memberships. The University of Elk Hunting, so Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 have put together the most fully comprehensive elk hunting learning course available today. And it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or you're someone that's been doing this for a long time, there's a lot of things you can learn from this course. Think of just, years and years of elk hunting knowledge poured into one course, from the planning phases all the way through the fitness, gear, calling, the elk hunting behavior, the elk behavior, and all the way to the meat packing and processing. So there's a ton of information there. And if you sign up for the course now with the code EastMeetsWest, you'll save yourself 20% off and get 20 extra entries to win an Elk 101 truck. They're giving away a pretty nice truck here. I believe they're giving it away in November, so you still have some time to be able to check that out and prepare for elk hunting. And Maven Optics. So Maven's direct-to-consumer business model has allowed them to be able to come out with the highest quality optics at half the price of their European competitors. So their glass is it's clear, it's crisp, the edge quality is amazing, the clarity, and everything is ED glass. They use Japanese glass inside the Maven Optics, and in the B series, the components are assembled right here in the United States. So if you want to check out Maven Optics, you can go over to mavenbuilt.com and use the code EastMeetsWest-gift to get yourself a free gift with any full price optics order. All right, so this episode of the podcast, it was one that I co-hosted with a good friend of mine, Clint Campbell from the Truth from the Stand podcast. I love doing podcasts with Clint. He's an awesome guy, whether I've been a guest on his show or he's been on this podcast before. And we decided at the BHA, the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Muster in the Mountains, to just do something together. And so that's what we did. And this one is with Bryan Burhans, who is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And it's all surrounding Sunday hunting, public lands, and everything else Pennsylvania hunting. And the reason for this podcast releasing right now is it's a very crucial time in, everyone that does support Sunday hunting, and I'll kind of explain that. So the Pennsylvania chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers has made the repeal of Pennsylvania's Sunday hunting ban its top legislative issue. That we believe that the restrictions amount to basically a no hunting sign on the whole state for half of the time that most of us have to hunt, which are the weekends. So in June, Senate Bill 147 was amended, which basically what that is it allowed for Sunday hunting and they agreed on 3 days of Sunday hunting and to strengthen trespass laws. And that made it through the Pennsylvania Senate and was referred to the House Game and Fisheries Committee. So while that's making historic progress in the fight to end the ban on Sunday hunting, the battle is far from over. We really want to be able to have all Sundays to be able to hunt like just about every other state in the country. So with the House Game and Fisheries Committee set to hold a public hearing on Sunday hunting on Tuesday, September 10th, which is just coming up next week, we once again have a really prime opportunity to weigh in with the lawmakers. So it's important that your representatives know that you support the bill and want it to get a vote in the full House. So if you would, I am going to have a link in the show notes. Take a minute to tell your lawmakers to stop ignoring the needs of us hunters and, vote basically to, bolster our hunting heritage by repealing that ban it's just an old law that hasn't changed. So I'll have a link there, and it's really simple. BHA, everything's filled out for you. All you basically do is put your name and your email and your address in there, and the reason for your address is it'll send it to the right representative of your area, and it takes less than a minute, and you can have it sent over and show your support for Sunday hunting. If you want to take another step, you can call that representative's office yourself and really try to make a difference. But remember, they're meeting here Tuesday, September 10th, which is only, a few days away. So taking action on this immediately would really, help out and try to do that. You can get, some more information on BHA's full Sunday hunting statement on their website, backcountryhunters.org, and get some more information there. So I wanted to give a little update because we recorded this podcast back in June, and some of this stuff, is new since we did that recording. So I think it's really important, and I know there's some people that don't agree with Sunday hunting, and that's fine, but I'd really like you to keep an open mind with it and look at it from a whole bunch of standpoints that we'll talk about here in this podcast. So I guess without further ado here, we'll jump right into the podcast with myself, Clint Campbell, and Bryan Burhans.
All right, folks. Welcome back to another episode of this podcast, which is co-branded with my good buddy Bo Martonic of East Meets Words in English are good. East Meets West podcast, and of course Clint here from the Truth from the Stand podcast.
Yeah. So Clint, this is good to be on another episode here with you, kind of going through and co-hosting it, and super excited to have Bryan on here today to talk a little bit. I'm super excited to talk about our home state of Pennsylvania.
That's right. We had Land on a little earlier, talked a little bit, probably more nationally. We drilled down into PA just a little bit. But our guest today is Bryan Burhans of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, which I've wanted to have someone on from the PA Game Commission for quite some time, considering that I'm from Pennsylvania, grew up hunting Pennsylvania, and that's kind of was my, of course, with our heavy tradition of hunting or whatever, I've always wanted to have someone's perspective from the state level. So appreciate you coming on. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You bet, man. So I think first, before we dive into some of the juicier topics, there's been a lot going on in Pennsylvania with the laws and some adaptations of laws and so forth. So before we kind of jump into all that, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a sense of your background, the role you have with the PA Game Commission, and kind of how you got to that point.
Sure, yeah. I'm the executive director for the agency, and as I was growing up as a kid, I'm from Pennsylvania. I always wanted to work for the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and I came up through the ranks. I'm trained as a wildlife biologist, and in my career, I've worked in a number of states as a biologist in Florida and Virginia. Then I moved into nonprofit work with two conservation organizations. I was with the National Wild Turkey Federation in South Carolina for about 12 years, and then took over as CEO for the American Chestnut Foundation, which is an organization developing blight-resistant trees to restore to the eastern United States. So. And then I had the opportunity to come back here to Pennsylvania. So it took me a while, but I finally found my way back in, and I got a chance to work with the most amazing state wildlife agency in the country.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome that you got to have that perspective that's, outside just Pennsylvania too, to kind of see how each, state runs things, and I'm sure helps with with your current role.
Absolutely. You would think that every state's different, and every state is different, but every state's the same too. But people are people. And, right. But it's a great agency, great state. I mean, we are so blessed here in Pennsylvania to have over 6 million acres of land open to public hunting. Pennsylvania Game Commission owns and manages 1.5 million acres of ground that's specifically managed for wildlife as the priority management technique. So we're lucky in Pennsylvania, and having lived in many other states where it's hard to find a place to hunt, Pennsylvania, it's almost like falling off a log.
Right. Yeah, there's no shortage of hunting opportunities in PA. I think the misconception a lot of folks have, in Pennsylvania, you'll hear people talk about there's not a lot of hunting. Well, some folks will say that, right? I think those are the folks who maybe are referring to, private access, maybe, right? Because for me, it's like I grew up in what I refer to as Pennsylvania, which is the middle part of the state. And grew up predominantly on private land. We have family-owned farms and stuff like that. So I really never hunted public until I got older. Now we still have those family farms, and I actually gravitate now toward the public just because of all the opportunity that's there. Moved to the eastern part of the state when I grew up in the central and western part of the state. Had no really understanding of the public land opportunities on the eastern part of the state, but now that's really kind of all I hunt. I think I do like maybe 3 hunts a year on our family property, and then 95% of the rest of my hunting in Pennsylvania is public lands.
I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania when I was a kid hunting in the 70s and 80s. You just knocked on doors and you always got some place to hunt.
Yeah.
And the place I used to walk out my back door and literally deer hunt was because I came up as a bow hunter. Today, the landowner won't let you on there, and a lot of the land has been posted. People are kept out. I live in the Harrisburg area now, and for me, it's just a short drive to one of our biggest roadless areas that are state game lands 211, 53,000 acres. And it's just amazing the opportunities. That's just one. There's many more right around there.
Well, it's crazy. So I grew up in Elk County, and that's where I currently live. And just in northern PA alone, there's 2 million acres of public land, whether that's, Game Commission managed, or there's state forest, or there's the Allegheny National Forest, all that stuff. It's so many opportunities. And I was talking on the earlier podcast, when I moved to the Pittsburgh area, I didn't realize how lucky I was. I took it all for granted. And and we have all these opportunities. And even down there, I found a bunch of places after you look, but there's just so much, and there's so many different seasons and just places to be able to go. And Pennsylvania's, I feel lucky to, have grown up here and still live here,
It's great because, I grew up like Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, even Virginia. If you were willing to write a check for $1,200, you had a place to hunt, and you had a lot of people hunting on that small little chunk of land.
Yeah.
Up here, there is some leasing that goes on in the state, but with so much public land, it's really truly God's country up here.
Yeah. I want to ask you, given you've had a pretty a diverse background in terms of where you've lived and working in the outdoors, across a bunch of different states, knowing, and we'll get to some of the policy stuff that's going on in Pennsylvania now, but do you see a similarity between the hunters of those states, or are they different in terms of what they want, right? So Sunday hunting, and we'll get to that, is a big topic in PA. But I'm just curious if the attitudes and maybe even the awareness of what's going on with hunting, public lands, laws that are going to impact them, are they any more or less aware than the folks in PA? And what's their kind of mindset?
I think the Pennsylvania hunter seems to be very aware of what's going on. I think there is definitely a cultural difference between the Southeast, where the state has far less hunters, the seasons are far more liberal. So the culture in Pennsylvania, you see this in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio to an extent as well. There's a different culture there because there's so many hunters out there competing for what is a finite resource.
Yeah.
Again, as you get down to the Southeast, it's just not as many hunters, so the competition for the resource isn't as high. In Pennsylvania, every state is a traditionalist. I'm not going to pick on Pennsylvania because they're really no more traditional than any other state. But there are some things like Sunday hunting, which is all the other states have been able to shake that off their back and finally unravel that and get rid of it because it's such a detriment to hunting and conservation. Pennsylvania, it's a tough state, because again, the competition for the limited resources that we have, and we have a lot of resources here in the state, and we just didn't do it that way before. And I get communications from hunters all the time, and some of the anecdotal funniest ones are, I don't want another day because I need to rest.
Yeah,
But you don't have to go out and hunt.
You don't have to go out and hunt. So, but my buddy Bob, he's going to be out hunting, and he might get my buck. So again, there's a lot of competition in the state. And the Sunday hunting thing is really, I always tell the story when I'm up talking to people about Sunday hunting is that I do this for Nolan. Nolan's my 25-year-old son, lives in North Carolina, recently graduated from Western Carolina. And when he was growing up in South Carolina, we had, I worked for a nonprofit, National Wild Turkey Federation. We worked all the time. And when you work, when volunteers work. Right. So, but Sunday after church was our time to go out and go turkey hunting. And we did that. And that's really all the time I had with him. We did a lot of turkey hunting together, but it was Sunday afternoons. Mm-hmm. We did skip church a couple times if it was really hot. But, to this day, my son's a diehard turkey hunter. And I don't think he'd be a hunter today if it wasn't for that opportunity we had on Sunday, because he really doesn't hunt deer at all.
Right.
He started getting into waterfowl hunting a little more, but it's because we had that Sunday. And there's so many people like me. I was early career at that time. I didn't have much time. I had lots of time off, but having time to take off and being able to take off time are two different
things.
Different things. So, I'm really grateful that my son grew up in a state that allowed Sunday hunting, and I'm glad I didn't raise my son here in Pennsylvania through those important years,
right?
Because I don't know if I would have been able to keep him in hunting. I know so many kids that come from hunting families that really never get into hunting,
right.
And it's unfortunate to see.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, growing up, hunting was a big thing in my family. It was a birthright.
Yeah.
When you turned 12, you were going to hunt. It was come hell or high water. That was kind of was the approach, right? My dad worked third shift, so it wasn't like he had a lot of time to take me out. But I was fortunate in the sense that we owned a bunch of land. So once I became kind of old enough and he introduced me, I could grab a shotgun and go out and turkey hunt after school in the fall or whatever I wanted to do, and it wasn't a big deal. I think it's super impactful for those folks who don't own land, and it's a I don't want to say a process, but it's an act to get out into the timber, right, and introduce a kid to the timber, or an adult for that matter, right? You touched on something that I want to kind of circle back to, and because I don't think people think about it in this sense. You said, not having Sunday hunting is a detriment to conservation, right? And I think any hunter worth their salt, if they truly care about not just the tradition, but what it means for, access to public lands, and what it means for, making sure things are properly funded, so you have the type of hunting that you want to have and all those things. I don't think they see the connection between the two sometimes, right? Yeah. So I guess just give me some examples of what you mean by, not having Sunday hunting is a detriment to conservation.
It lessens our ability. It's one more hurdle we have to cross to be able to introduce and keep people into hunting, trapping, angling. When you look at how conservation was set up in North America, look at Teddy Roosevelt and all these heroes we have of conservation. It was the hunters that actually made that happen. It's not only the license dollars that the hunters provide that supports a big bulk of conservation in the whole continent or in North America, but more important than that, it's the passion. Mm-hmm. The hunters have always been, it's their passion that has driven their actions to make conservation succeed. It isn't just writing a check. Writing a check isn't going to get you anywhere if nobody cares. Mm-hmm. Hunters care. They care about the resource. They care about conservation. Yeah. It's that passion that has driven conservation in this country and made it what it is today. I mean, we talk about this North American model of wildlife conservation, and it has several tenets about it. And simply being that, the wildlife belong to the people. The states manage it. We're entrusted to manage it for the people. And we make this available to everybody. You can't own wildlife, and just because you can write a big check, you're the only one that gets to hunt that deer or that elk or that turkey. The wildlife are out for all of us to enjoy, and we need to make sure that we save that heritage for the long term.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And we touched on that a little bit with Land when we were talking to him, because it was more about that passion. And I think he put it poetically whenever he was giving his, kind of opening ceremony speech here, that it's about those one-on-one conversations, and it's about the communication. And you don't get that if there's not passion.
No.
Right? And you can't replace that with a check.
Yep.
You can't replace that with, a land donation. As much as we like land donations, right, for things, whether it's public land donation or like someone, like we have here, someone offering up their farm for an event that's important. But you can't replace that passion and that one-on-one conversation it's had.
It comes down to people.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and to go back a little bit to what you were saying about, like with taking your son out, you only had that Sundays. I think of it specifically. I have a younger cousin of mine. He's probably in high school now or middle school, somewhere in there. But we come from a really strong hunting family, but he's in school 5 days a week, and then he has football games on Saturdays. So he looks, and then he can't get out, until the seasons. Maybe he'll get out a couple days a year at most, and he likes it and wants to do it, but it doesn't have those opportunities. And who knows if maybe that, liking it will just turn into, I don't really care about it anymore. And there's, one more person that we lost in the next generation that's going to be, that's, what we're looking for. We need that next generation to keep going up, I
mean, what other recreational activity has a day you can't do it?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you were a golfer and you couldn't hunt or if you couldn't golf on Saturdays, how long would golf courses stay in place? If you were a skier and you could only ski, you couldn't ski on Sunday, how many ski places would close down? Hunting is the same thing. Yeah. So it's it's not only that, it's about private property landowner rights as well. You pay the taxes on that land, you manage that land, you may farm that land or raise timber on that land, but whatever it is, it's your land, and then somebody's coming in and telling you can't do a recreational activity on a certain day.
Right.
It defies all common sense.
It's what blows my mind a little bit, right, is that, demographically speaking, right, our hunting group is, if you were to create a bell curve or some type of chart, we would all probably lean more on the right side of the political spectrum, right, to a degree. In that sphere, like, we're more interested in less regulation. Let me kind of manage my own destiny, right? The left side is more about oversight, regulation, and big brothering to a degree. And I'm not going to get political here because I'm not making the argument that one's better than the other. But like, if you just look at it on the surface, those are type 2 kind of principles of each side, right? And it kind of blows my mind that we don't like regulation on the right whenever it's related to business or almost anything else. But when it comes to hunting, we want the regulation. Yeah. You know what I mean? And to me, that's the part for me that I'm kind of, I don't want to use the word hypocrite because that's a strong word, but it's like, it just doesn't make sense.
No. And you look at one of the big arguments you'll hear from some people is, well, we want that day our family can be out and we can feel safe. Now, let's not lessen their concern about safety.
Right. Everyone has a voice.
Everybody has a voice, and they have a real concern.
Yeah, valid
Whether
concern.
or not it's valid and reflected in what actually is occurring out there is different. So I'm not going to in any way belittle individuals that feel maybe insecure or not safe out there. But let's look at some facts and some realities. For example, I hear this from some of the hiking groups all the time. And I'm a backpacker. I like to get out there and hike the Appalachian Trail through Pennsylvania. And when I'm doing it, most of the time it is on a Saturday during archery season. Even during muzzleloader season. I'll be out during the hunting season hiking. Do I worry? Absolutely not. Now, I also know the statistics behind hunting incidents. And hunting, I'm far more in any danger of going to the trailhead than I am being in a hunting incident. In fact, we just got through spring turkey season where nobody even wears fluorescent orange, and we didn't have one single incident. So the argument about hunting being dangerous is completely a fallacy. It's not true at all. Now, folks with a concern about feeling safe, that's a real thing to them.
So because that's a feeling.
That's a feeling with them.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, look at archery season in October. They're in camouflage up a tree. Nobody even knows they're there.
I don't know how many times on public land I've watched a guy, because I hunt some
walk right underneath
suburban areas, right, where a guy comes walking his dog, and I'm 20 feet up watching him walk his dog. I'm like, get my binos on him, check him out, try to see what kind of dog he's got. You know what I mean? It's like the guy's none the wiser that I'm there. So I didn't mean to interrupt. But.
No. And I think one of the things that frustrates some of our hunters, you look at our Pennsylvania game lands that the agency has acquired. The funding from that has come from a lot of places. Actually, some great partners have helped us fund that. Pittman Robertson, which from the Pittman Robertson Act has helped fund. So that's shooters and hunters that are help funding that. We get land donations, and we have so many great nonprofits here in Pennsylvania that help us acquire these lands. But hunters still have a lot of skin in that game, and they're being told that, well, that day a week you can't even go on game lands.
Right.
So that's why they're so frustrated with this. And again, crippling. We're nationally we're seeing a decline in hunter numbers. And I think Sunday hunting is just one more nail in the coffin that doesn't have to be there.
Right. So we've been kind of dancing around the Sunday hunting topic, so let's just kind of jump right in. So, I've done some reading on it and so forth, and I've always kind of been aware of the blue laws growing up because, it also, maybe as a youth, it was more impactful because, you couldn't get a six-pack on Sundays or whatever, right? That might be how some people were introduced to it. You can't sell cars on Sundays, right? There's a lot of different blue laws. So can you give us like a little bit of a historical context of like where the blue law kind of came from, how hunting what came about to not be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Historically speaking,
if you look at, especially in Pennsylvania, with the Christian religious atmosphere strong here in Pennsylvania, basically, and if you do the research on the blue laws, whether they're put in place, it's quite apparent. I mean, it's stated their job was to keep your butt in a pew at church on Sunday. Yeah. That was the job of the blue laws, was to keep you in church and not doing something else. And I get that, but that should be up to an individual of when they're going to do their worship and when they do their worship and how they consider hunting as whether it's work or recreation or whatever their beliefs are. That's something that's personal, something that makes, at least to me, no sense that it's mandated by law to keep my butt in church.
Right.
Whether you go to church or you don't go to church, having Sunday hunting or not having Sunday hunting is not going to keep you in church or keep you out of church.
Well, not just that, but it's like I know plenty of folks, who, my good buddy, actually, he's a youth pastor, right? Heavily involved in the church. And he probably wouldn't Sunday hunt as much, and he's stated as much just because like his job is to be in church, right? Like to work. But like I know for a fact, like for him, it's like part of his spirituality comes from being in the timber, right? And so to tell someone that they can't worship in a place because it doesn't fit the model that you think worship should take place in seems a little antiquated.
You think about it, hunting creates a lot of opportunity for us to contemplate.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
100%. We were talking about that earlier. I talk about this almost any time I talk hunting with somebody. Is like that's my place to unravel my mind. You know what I mean, and get a perspective on not just where I fit into things, right? Not to get all hippy dippy here, a little crunchy, but to think about what am I doing? Like, what's my place? Am I doing the things the right way that I think that I should be doing them? Like all those things. I mean, it's amazing what you come away with when you have nothing but time on your hands, right? I always hope a deer comes by and interrupts it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
that'd be nice. Yeah. I try not to get too far into it that I don't miss the deer walking by.
Right. Well, hunting means a lot of things to different people, but I'm with you. I mean, part of what hunting provides me is kind of that charge down, that kind of release of you're forced not to do anything.
Yeah.
Where else do you go? When you're in your job or at the office or wherever you work, I mean, it's constant go. You can't slack for a second. As human beings, you cannot keep that pace forever. And for me, hunting provides that opportunity. I'm a big turkey hunter, especially in the spring, which provides me more napping opportunities. My secret to turkey hunting. So, to me, I don't get to hunt that much because of my career path, but the time I do get out there is so very precious to me, and to be told that that day's off limits to you, it's to me it's crushing because that I love to hunt. It's not like I can't have solitude on a Sunday anyway. Right. I love to hunt. It's what I love to do. I was born a hunter. I've always been a hunter my whole life, and I'm going to continue to hunt.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the challenging things, another aspect of it is, it just kind of came to me, is that, more and more people are moving away from rural settings because of job opportunities or lack thereof in more rural settings, right? And I'm a prime example of this because I grew up in rural PA. I would love nothing more than to live in rural PA and be able to hunt out my back door, right? But for what I do for a living, that's just not possible. And then, not similarly, but, to build on to that, my dad lives in North Carolina, right? And it's hard for he and I to get together to share a hunt based on our work schedules and stuff like that. And when he has time to travel all the way up from North Carolina to Pennsylvania to hunt. And a lot of times we'll miss a hunting opportunity because, he has maybe something he has to do Friday late. He can't get out till whatever time. He's going to drive up, get there late Friday night, have to wake up early Saturday morning, and then turn right back around and go home. And that extra day of hunting, that Sunday, is probably a day that he would probably come up because he would get 2 days in to hunt versus one day that most of it's going to be travel, and we're going to get to see each other for 2 hours, an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening when we get back from hunting, and then he's got to get out of there. Yeah. And there's no opportunity for the next day.
I'm saying, but when I lived out of state, I probably came up and, let's look at it. Out of state, non-resident hunting license is only $100.
Yep.
Probably the cheapest non-resident license I'm aware of. But I only came up during my, 18, 20 years living in the Southeast twice that I can recall. Mm-hmm. Why? Because I'm only going to be able to hunt one day. My son now lives in North Carolina. I've got better turkey hunting up here in Pennsylvania than they do in North Carolina. But I'm going to go probably hunt with him in North Carolina. Why? Because he's a young professional. He's in a new job. He doesn't have those time off, so we'll be able to hunt Saturday and Sunday together. So for me to make a 10-hour trip down there, and then a 10-hour trip back.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I can spend some time with him doing something we enjoy to do. But to come up here and do it for, especially early season, all I got is till noon. So he comes up, he hunts for 8 hours, and we're done.
Yeah.
One more time than that.
And that was exactly what I was going to say next about the non-resident thing. So I have a bunch of buddies from different states and everything, and I go to Ohio to hunt. I'll go for a long weekend. I'll drive out Friday night, camp, hunt Saturday, Sunday, drive back Sunday night. And they won't buy a tag here because they're like, oh, we only get one day to do that. And I've had, just in my small circle of people that I know, be like, I'd buy, hunting license in Pennsylvania, a non-resident license, if I could hunt Sundays, because it's not that it's the lack of opportunity or the hunting that they're not buying them. It's just the lack of time.
Right, because I think that was maybe true whenever I was growing up, as far as like the caliber or the quality of the hunt. If it's whether it's antler size, and I'm talking deer specifically here, of course. Whether it's bone on the head or just age structure. Right, I know growing up, like there were some struggles, especially in the area that I grew up in. But now, I don't ever remember growing up seeing the caliber of deer that I see now, and more consistently. So there are definitely pockets in PA where it's like if you're a hunter from Maryland or even Ohio, that you can get on some really, really good deer, and it's and based on the cost of a non-resident license, especially if you tag out in Ohio and you live near Pittsburgh, there's no reason why you couldn't or shouldn't hunt Western PA, because Western PA has some great deer, and I just think about the additional amount of dollars we could pull in, to help our public lands or whatever, however it's spent, if we could attract some of those non-resident hunters to get them to spend that $100 or whatever it is on that tag to extend their hunting season.
Yeah, we're sending them out of state right now. I don't know how many friends I work with or know that either have gotten into a lease or bought land in New York or Ohio, because they can go up there and they can hunt that Saturday, Sunday. I know I'm going to be buying a New York out-of-state license because I have a turkey dog, and I got a lot invested in this dog. I want to get out and use them.
Yep.
I got to work Monday through Friday like the rest of the world.
Yep.
So we're going to head up to New York. We may hit Pennsylvania for maybe a day, but I'm definitely going to New York because I can hunt that Sunday.
Right, and I do the same thing. I go to Ohio every year, and that's usually like when I get out a lot during the course of the early season. But I mean, once late October hits, it's like I usually have a 2-week trip to Ohio to hunt basically from the beginning of November to mid-November to almost Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Because I can hunt, all week, and I can watch the weather and pick which days I'm going to hunt, because I don't have to worry about, man, I can't hunt Sunday. So it's like if the weather's like iffy on Saturday, it's like I probably needed to risk it and take a chance, because I'm not going to get to hunt Sunday, and then I'm back to work Monday. So I want to ask you, of course, we're in the throes of us making, when I say us, the hunting population that supports, Sunday hunting, we're probably in the best place that we've ever been in terms of pushing that agenda forward to hopefully opening the opportunity.
I don't think it's ever been this far.
Yeah. So the original proposal that it went through earlier this year, it went through as like Sunday hunting wholesale, like we want Sunday hunting, and it passed. I think then it went to the Senate, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it started in the Senate.
It started in the Senate, went to the approps, yeah. And so what has happened now is that they're entertaining it still, but we made some accommodations, which always happens when you go through any type of policy, updates and trying to massage some laws, right? So it came out slightly changed. Can you talk a little bit about how it was proposed and what some of the changes are and why we would make some of those changes?
And how it was proposed is very simple. The Pennsylvania Game Commission, we're an independent state wildlife agency. Our job is, legislature says you are responsible for managing the state's wildlife habitat. The Sunday hunting, being an old blue law, has always been on the books, though. You can manage it, but you just can't do it on that day. And we're required by law to manage wildlife with the primary means of hunting and trapping. Mm-hmm. So those are our tools that are given at our disposal and to manage these wildlife populations. So it's always been on the books that you can't touch Sunday, but you do the best you can with everything else. And the agency's done a wonderful job for 125 years. So done a great job. The bill original proposal was basically to say, okay, you have now, the Pennsylvania Game Commission, you now have the authority to determine where Sunday hunting would occur, which Sundays you would pick for Sunday hunting. We have the subject matter experts. We have the biologists that research the populations. We have the data that can show what they can support and what they can't support and adjust seasons and bag limits and all those things. So we have, that's our wheelhouse. That's what we do. So the bill originally was to say, okay, we're going to finally fix this and say, that's your now responsibility to determine where to put these Sundays. Now, we have a very specific process we have to follow as an agency before we implement these seasons of bags or any regulations we do. We have a process where we have 2 commission meetings. There's public comment. There's written comments. There's a whole process that takes months and months and months to go through. It's not that we can say, okay, we want those. No, we have to go through the process and work through the process. We listen to landowners. We listen to the hunters, the bow hunters, the rifle hunters. They all have their voice. And then our 8-member board of commissioners who are nominated by the governor, they're confirmed by the Senate, but they're the board, so it's different. This is kind of the way wildlife agencies were originally structured, which is the best model for wildlife management, which is these independent agencies, because then the board can listen to this public input, listen to the scientists, put all this together, and then try to make the best decision they can for the resource and for the hunters and for the people. So that's what the original bill was, to give that authority back to the game, or give it to the Game Commission to go through that regulatory process and make that decision. But wildlife policy is like a sausage grinder. What goes in isn't always what it comes out.
Right.
So I think, my best guess, my interpretation of what has come out is this is what we think we can do now.
Right.
And it is about negotiation, and sometimes it's a step at a time, incremental towards where you want to go.
Right. Yeah. And what I had most recently read, was that they're looking at now moving it forward still, but looking at an opportunity to choose 3 days during one of the hunting seasons, during the breadth of the hunting season in PA, and kind of choosing where they want to slot in each one of those 3 days during the course of the year. Which I'm always kind of the mind, like you said, like everything's a negotiation, right? And I know some folks are up in arms about, we shouldn't have to negotiate something like this because it just seems stupid that we don't already have it.
It should be based on the science. The wildlife science would dictate where this is done.
Right.
Let's not ignore the social and political part of it, because it's equally as important.
As much as we want to call it dirty baseball or whatever. Like it's something you have to that exists and you got to work around or work with. And so I've always kind of been of the mind, like, yes, I would like to see it pass through fully and have Sunday hunting across the board like any other state. As you mentioned, you're looking at the data. And we have plenty of analogs across the country, from western states to states that are closer to home that probably look more like us economically and demographically. Whether it's Ohio, West Virginia, New York, whatever. Just pick one, right? And we have a good analog that we could kind of look and see, and predict what the outcomes are going to be. But at the same time, I always kind of have the mind. I'm like, if we need to prove it, I have no doubt that we can. And so if you want to just give us 3 days, then give us the 3 days, and we will then prove to you that some of your concerns, while they might be valid because it's your perspective or your perception, right? But we'll kind of deteriorate that perspective, giving us the opportunity to prove you wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's the right approach.
Yeah.
And again, we've got a wonderful legislature in the state of Pennsylvania that you can't just say, well, it's the legislature doing this. They're really a byproduct of the people. They're listening to their constituents. So it's not that we have crooked politics in Pennsylvania or anything like that, or that this group is bad and this group is good. It's just this is the way the system works, and it doesn't work very fast. And, you look at Washington, D.C. Thank goodness we have gridlock in Washington, D.C. Can you imagine if everything ran at a moment's glance? We'd all be in trouble. So, government does work. It is slow, but it's slow for a reason, and it works better that way when it's like this. So this whole process, although it frustrates us as hunters, it's still not a bad process. And the members of the legislature, they're making tough decisions that impact them and their constituents. So they really have to pay attention to that. Respect what they do and what they bring to this process. But at the end of the day, I'm a believer that eventually here in Pennsylvania we'll eventually have Sunday hunting.
Right.
Well, it's like, so if you think about it, I do this at work too when I have tasks that I'm working on. Okay, say we have a problem and the end goal is this, but getting the end goal might not be, maybe say it's money or it's time or something that you can't get 100% there, but you can have something that you can put in place that's getting you like 80% of the way there, just not 100%. That's one step in the right direction. For me, I'd rather start moving that way rather than it's all or nothing, that type of thing. And that's kind of how I look at this as far as, yes, I want every Sunday, but if they're going to give us that little bit of a start, that's good, and let's keep pushing.
Yeah, let's keep pushing it. And again, you look at the safety record. We have a hugely successful hunter-trapper safety course here in Pennsylvania. Started in 1960, 61, and it's been. You look at the track record of safety in Pennsylvania, like other states, and it is just phenomenal. It is a safe activity to be involved in, and So safety isn't the issue, and I understand somebody wants to walk. But the bottom line is Pennsylvania. If for private lands at least, the landowner decides who's on there.
Yeah.
They can say, no, I don't want anybody hunting on my land. In fact, the agency's offered that we'll provide you no Sunday hunting land signs for your land if that's what you so.
Right.
But we'll see what happens. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too, and I think Rome wasn't built in a day. So we just kind of have to keep plugging away toward the end goal.
But it was quicker than getting Sunday hunting.
It was probably quicker than getting Sunday hunting. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you there. So I'm just curious because I think there's a lot of, maybe it's not a myth, but I'm curious who's historically opposed Sunday hunting, right? Because there's always interests in politics, as you mentioned, whether it's your constituents, whether it's private folks, whether it's business groups or whatever the case is. Everyone has an interest in different things. And so one thing I think historically, and Bo, tell me if you've heard anything different growing up in PA too. Like I always heard that the Farm Bureau was one of the biggest oppositions to Sunday hunting, on the premise that they're having the voice of the farmers. And Pennsylvania historically has been a big agricultural state probably until the past maybe 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. And that they had a lot of influence because we were an agricultural state, so they held a lot of the dollars, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, is there any truth to that, or where does the opposition come from?
Farm Bureau has been very active in this. Mm-hmm. They have been obviously very influential on this decision. What we've seen recently, though, is a splintering within the Farm Bureau. There's a lot of farmers that do want Sunday hunting because we've got deer populations that are really hurting. You look over the last 20, 30 years especially, more and more private lands are being restricted to hunting for a number of reasons. You may have a hunt club that doesn't want to shoot any does, and they're just pounding the heck out of that poor farmer's crops, and he's not able to make a living. You've got land that's just posted for no hunting at all. Mm-hmm. So the landscape has become fragmented of lands where deer management has been very difficult. So a lot of these hunters are a lot of these farmers that I'm hearing from and talk to are opinion, we need as many tools in the toolbox as we can to manage this deer herd so our families can make a living.
Right.
And there's a lot of farmers that hunt as well that would like to do that. So I think you've seen a splittering. Even when you look at hunters, if you look at past surveys of hunters years and years ago, hunters were really split over Sunday hunting. And now you're seeing that movement. Now it's pushed to the positive side, but it's still the younger demographic. It's really the demographic like we see here today at the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. This event today is, you are that group between 25 and 40. Those are the folks that really want Sunday hunting.
Right.
Your more older traditional hunters, some of them still aren't sold on it. I could come up with a bunch of theories why.
Right.
But that's what we're seeing is that change in demographics.
Yeah.
So that kind of confirms, right? There's a dog in the fight there, right? And that's kind of what the myth.
They've been official about their statement on the Farm Bureau.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So who's it takes an equal and opposite reaction to move the needle, right? And so you have them in their position that they've been, clear about. Yeah. So what has the equal and opposite reaction been in support of Sunday hunting? Like where has that come from? Because it's
sure.
It's as you had mentioned, it's a layered kind of approach, right? It's the constituents, it's business interests, it's all these things, right? So we have the constituents, we have the populace, right, of people who want hunting. Where did that business interest or that, I don't want to say money interest because I don't want to make it sound dirty. Yeah.
I think there's a couple things. One thing, remember in politics, when as a member of the legislature, when you hear from somebody, they're not usually calling you up and saying, man, everything's wonderful. I'm glad the way things are going, doing a wonderful job, and by the way, I support Sunday hunting. It's typically, I'm mad, they talked about Sunday hunting, I don't want it in my backyard, I don't want to hear from it. So on the political side, I think usually hear negative reactions, not positive reactions. Right. And every time I talk to a member of the legislature, I said, when's the last time somebody said it's rainbows and unicorns and things are wonderful?
Right.
It just doesn't happen.
Right.
It's kind of like our office, too, at times.
Right.
I think one of the game changers that happened this time was the Hunters Supporting Sunday Hunting, which is a new nonprofit group that started in Pennsylvania and really started that groundswell of getting people at the grassroots engaged. Because that's what it's been missing in Pennsylvania for so long, is that grassroots support. People think, well, I'm not going to contact my member of the legislature. They don't listen. They do listen. They absolutely listen. And they may not be able to read every letter, but somebody's reading those letters and giving a briefing to that member, and they're hearing what their constituents are saying. So to think that we don't have as a voice in our local community is completely false. They do listen. So that I think this hunter supporting Sunday hunting group really has helped shift that needle tremendously in Pennsylvania with this go around.
Yeah, and they've taken a little bit of a similar stance as backcountry hunters and anglers with their approach of getting the grassroots going and contacting your legislators. Because, I mean, before BHA, I never knew that you could actually do that. I was always just like that you could call them and contact them. I remember I filled out a form like it was almost like a general email I was going to send to my local representative, and I just put like a few of my own words in there, but it was basically a copy and paste. He called me, can't remember his last name was, that doesn't really matter. But anyways, where I was living at the time, he called me right away and was like, hey, what's the issue? I got your letter. Yeah. What, can you give me your points? And I talked to him, and it was really, really cool about it. And the guy he listened. Let's put it that way, you know, and that made me feel good. Like, okay, it is possible to get your word out no matter who you are or, what your concern is. If you have a valid concern and have reasonings behind it, they'll listen.
Well, I think, too, like doing stuff like that, it's a lot harder, this is just a big reason why people should get involved as much as they're capable of, is that it's really hard to be a jerk. And I use this in business, like in the business that I work in, whenever it's a human on the other side that you're dealing with. Yeah. It's really easy to discount someone when you don't have a face, you don't have a name, and it's just a random email that came in, and you have no clue who the person is and what their feelings are, right? I use that in the line of work that I'm in. I try to humanize things because it makes it a lot easier to talk through difficult conversations. But to build on what Bo said, I wanted to ask, you brought up BHA, and that was kind of where I was going to go, that grassroots kind of approach. Do you think the groundswell of events or organizations like a BHA or even like, QDMA getting more active in terms of grassroots kinds of things? And yes, they still do the habitat management stuff, but they've gotten more active in terms of I don't want to say throwing their weight around, but making it known what their position is on things. Do you think people seeing that, hey, I can be active, I can have a voice, and we can actually get some stuff done if we just make the effort? And do you think that organizations like this are having an impact outside of this organization specifically?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, there's no doubt individual organizations. If you look at the history of these non-governmental agencies that operate now compared to, say, 40 years ago. 40 years ago, you didn't have an NWTF Pheasants Forever, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. It was in Pennsylvania. It was a Pennsylvania Federation of Sportsman Clubs, and it was a very powerful organization. Now, what we've seen over the years is these groups have now splintered into these really more specialized
niche
interests. Yeah, ducks and deer. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the voice has weakened because they've splintered out. What Hunters Supporting Sunday Hunting has done is bring everybody who a member of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers or National Turkey Federation or Pheasants Forever help around a single one issue. Right. And then those individuals can go back to their organizations with that same message. So I think you got to have both. And I think, I come from the nonprofit world, and I've worked with nonprofit organizations in my professional career my whole life, and I can't overstate the importance of getting involved in a conservation organization and the impact that these organizations are having, because it's big. I mean, it's really big. And I've been following Backcountry Hunters and Anglers for some time because it's just been mind-blowing at the growth. And what it's really excited many of us about this group is, as I look around this yard, and at you two specifically, you represent the most difficult age demographic to get involved in keeping hunting.
Right.
You're between 25 and 40. Your early career, things are hard right now, and yet you guys are capturing those people and getting them engaged. And you're talking about hunting in a lot different way. Yeah. And more of an adventure and camaraderie and the scouting and the work that goes into it, about the place you're going and the people you meet. It's not just about sitting by your tree and waiting for a deer to walk by and boom, it's done.
100%. You and I.
You couldn't have said that any better.
Bo and I were just talking about that earlier today. That and we actually talked about it with Land a little bit. Actually, it was off mic, but just it's not about filling a tag anymore, right? And just even Bo and I sitting here doing this podcast together and co-branding it, like there's so much divisiveness in the hunting community at times, right? That I think this newer group of folks, because it's guys like Bo, we have a friend Kevin Vistison in Michigan, there's guys like, this guy D-Rock from the East Coast bow hunter that are all looking, and then we're not necessarily in the outdoor industry, because I don't like to use the word industry because I feel like it bastardizes anything that's good to a degree when you create an industry out of it. But we're all looking to collaborate and work together, share stories, share tips. It's, I'd be the first one if there was a big deer that I knew about that where Bo lived and say, hey, there's this big deer out here. Here's the GPS pin. Mm-hmm. You should go check it out, and vice versa. Yeah, like it's just there's.
Yeah,
this,
I don't know about that.
Well, see, as long as I'm not hunting there, It's like,
see, my age generation's not like that. You look at the Gen X's up at the baby boomers. You ask any turkey hunter. We always say any good turkey hunter never tells the truth. Share a turkey? Nope, didn't hear no thing. That's just the kind of way it is. But that's why I'm now claiming myself as a millennial. Right. Because I want to see people succeed. I want them out there in the woods, and I've harvested deer and turkeys. To me, it just has nothing to do. Do I want to harvest a turkey? Sure. Right. That's the end to a awesome book I just read, and boom, I got a 100%. Turkey, and man, I'm charged up. But don't forget about the rest of the book. It's such a great adventure and an experience, and I want to see other people enjoying that, because there's plenty of places, there's plenty of game, there's plenty of everything for everybody to enjoy it. We just need more people out there, because with a national decline in hunter numbers, one of the things we better watch ourselves as hunters is we become too fragmented and we start fighting with each other too much. We're going to lose it all.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. And it's funny, like, that's when I grew up. My dad's like, the way of like, we were walking out and someone's coming the other direction. All right. You didn't see anything. You didn't, I was coach. Like, don't tell him you saw it. Right. See anything? Nope. Nope. All right. Have a good one. Good luck.
I mean, there's a time and a place.
Yeah. And I'm not.
There's a time and a place.
I'm not sitting there. I'm going to be like, oh, I saw this giant 10-point in there. It was right over here. Here's the coordinates. I'm hunting there, but if you want to check it out, it's all of our woods. I'm not going to do that. But,
right. Well, because I had a buddy recently that literally used to live around where I live. And I met him through I think he listened to the show, and then we have a mutual friend, and he got a hold of our mutual friend and said, hey, I used to live out around where Clint lives, and he now lives in Ohio, and I don't think he's going to get back to hunt it, or maybe at all. And he's like, I got some pins on OnX that I've seen some really good deer out there that, if you think he's okay with it, if you'd give me his number, I'd like to send him the pins and see if those spots are still hot. Yeah. And so my buddy called me and said, hey, is this cool? And I was like, yeah. I was like, if he's got a beat on good deer and can help me get on some good deer, I was like, I'm all about it. Texting me, sharing pins, phone call, giving me the heads up of like where his stand placements were, like what it looked like, what crops were in around it and stuff like that. So I don't know that 15 years ago that would have ever happened.
No. It's a generational thing. It's that millennial generation. That's each generation's wired a little bit differently. Yeah. And I hear people picking on the millennials. My son's a millennial. Man, I wish I was a millennial. This is, in my opinion, one of the greatest generations to come out. They work hard. They're very creative. They value their personal time. They value their families. When I look back the generation before me, all the dads went to deer camp because, well, I worked all year. This is my time to go out with the guys. Yep. Your generation doesn't even think like that. My kids can't come with me. I'm not going to deer camp. It's more along usually that generation. So right. I'm actually excited for the future of hunting, watching this generation that's coming through the pipeline. Yeah. I just want more of them in there because, just as our senior hunters are so important to us because those are the mentors. Those are the people that are teaching other people to hunt. Our senior lifetime license holders are so valuable. We need more of you guys when it comes your day to be in that cohort in that place. Right.
And I think building on that and talking about how we talk about it a little bit differently. You were mentioning it's about the adventure, it's about the scouting, it's about the process. I think that also leads into, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, Bo, that I think in doing so, we're helping ourselves kind of create a better narrative. And when I say narrative, I don't want people to think about that in terms of like a false sense or like a marketing narrative, right? We're learning to build our narrative and how we should be talking to folks who are non-hunters to not paint ourselves, but to position ourselves in a truthful and best light.
I think you're developing a new brand for hunting that has been desperately needed for so long. The brand is you're just regular people out there having a good time. Yep. You're inclusive. You speak of conservation. It's part of who you are. You are rebranding hunting for what it was in past years.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. I mean, and the way I think of it is, you talk to a lot of people, and even growing up, I kind of thought this way was, I'll never apologize for being a hunter, and I don't mean that you should. But what I mean by that is make sure you're putting out in the most respectful light. Like, with the age of social media and stuff we have now, if you're, not to go down a complete rabbit hole of like,
take us down a rabbit hole, Bo. You're the rabbit hole master.
I know. But with like, just untasteful photos that maybe you can send, say you and I were texting, send it, and you wouldn't be offended by it or anything, but just being careful with it and trying to create that positive light that we really truly do enjoy that whole experience.
Well, it's honoring the heritage, it's honoring the process, and it's honoring the animal.
And you know what exactly. I mean? It's like, honoring the animal and the people around you.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't, this isn't something you turn it in. It's not about political correctness. It's about respect for other
100%.
people who may not understand your values and your heritage. But I can tell you what, if you don't respect their values and you present a deer with its tongue hanging out and blood's everywhere, you'll never get them to support hunting.
You got one chance to make a first impression.
Yep.
Plain and simple.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And what foot do you want to put forward as a group?
Yep.
And that's kind of how I always try to think about it, right? And I understand people say that, I should be able to post it however I want to. Yeah, you are allowed to post it however you want to. But you're also going to endure whatever those consequences are, right? I've always said I was always interested in possibly going to law school growing up, and constitutional law was like one of my favorite classes in college. And I loved free speech. Like the First Amendment was, of course, one of my favorite because it was always so misinterpreted, right? Because people assumed that free speech meant that there was no consequence for their speech. It's like, no, it's actually the opposite of that. You're free to say whatever you want and be an idiot if you would like, but there is an equal and opposite consequence for idiocy, and you'll find out what that looks like. You know what I mean? So, so that's kind of how I've always approached it, and I think we're seeing more and more people begin to approach it that way.
Absolutely.
And I think those, it's not that I want people to fit out right, but I think there's this sense of pressure in some groups of like being able, and I don't want to say fit in, but assimilating to how we need to act, right? I put it in the sense of like if you go to a job that's, or a new company, and I just joined a new company that's very family oriented, very tight knit, it's a small group. In the first like 30 days, like you're either going to fit in or fit out. Right, it's like you're going to know whether or not that's going to be a place for you long term, or whether you probably need to be looking for somewhere else, just because they have a definitive culture that you need to fit into, right? And they hire for that. I think hunting's starting to become the same, where there are more and more people every day trying to approach it. And I don't want to say the right way because I haven't written a book on the rule of like how we should be as hunters, but I think there's an unspoken kind of understanding, moral and ethical compass that we all want our brothers and sisters to follow. Mm-hmm. And if you're not following that, it becomes pretty apparent and you kind of look like a jerk. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that social pressure either makes you adapt and rethink or makes you be quiet. You know what I mean, to a degree. And then you have the opposite, which is the 10% who's just loud and obnoxious. And
do you want to create a brand that looks like the stereotype that's painted, unfortunately, of a few, or do you want to be what really the majority of our hunters are, which are great people that love the environment, love wildlife, love their families, love their friends.
And we can have differences.
Absolutely.
100%. We can all be different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we don't have to all do it the same way. But if it all
Turkey
comes...
hunting is more fun than
right.
It's just true.
Nice. So I want to jump to this next topic because if I talk anything about turkey hunting, it's a losing conversation for me since I'm the world's worst turkey hunter, admittedly, except for Bo, because he knocks his front teeth out with the shotgun.
Yeah, it's pretty close
told
to that.
Told me that story last night. It was a good one.
Yeah, I know.
So I want to talk to the other big thing that kind of happened in the state as far as hunting is concerned is hunting season changes, right? The dates that are changing.
Saturday opener.
Yeah, Saturday opener for deer season. You would have thought that the world possibly was coming to an end with the firestorm that happened on social media. So if you could just give us a little background about where that came from and how that's kind of changing.
Yeah, for several decades now, Monday has always been the opener for our rifle deer season. And deer hunting is an amazing tradition here in Pennsylvania. When I say about traditions, I mean with Pennsylvania, I don't think there's any state that has a stronger deer hunting culture and tradition than Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So one of the challenges that we have in hunting, we've talked about this before, is keeping people involved in hunting and creating more opportunities. Reducing barriers is probably a better way to look at it. And when you look at the numbers, and I look at hunters that come through a pipeline. So you start out in Pennsylvania, maybe you start out, you're 11, you get your hunter safety. Maybe you started as a mentor, but you're 11, you come in and you get your hunter safety course. And I get a big group of potential hunters that come in, and of that big pot of young to-be hunters, a few of them transition and actually purchase a hunting license and actually go hunting. What you end up seeing is right when they hit about those college years, it plummets.
Yeah.
And then it plummets and it stays down there for quite some time till, really get into the late 40s and 50s. Why is that happening? Well, it makes perfect sense. You go to college, you don't have time to hunt. The only time I haven't hunted in my life, I only did it one semester. It was such a bad semester, I actually grounded myself from hunting because I'm such an addicted hunter. I was afraid I wouldn't get my work done, so I grounded myself. It's the only time in my life I didn't buy a hunting license, and it was just for one spring. But when you look at the Saturday opener, we know that we need that 25 to 35 because right now, okay, you're out of college, you're just starting your career, you don't have any vacation days built up, or if you're working a trade somewhere, maybe in a union, you don't have any seniority, you don't have the time. If you do get time, it's not going to be a weekend, I guarantee you that.
Right.
So we got these early professionals that are out there and they're working their careers, and they got young families and all the demands that come onto them for their families. And we talked about changes in generations. This generation is very much tied to their families, and that Saturday opener was designed to provide that opportunity, especially for this age, this 25 to 35, 40-year-olds, to give them more opportunity to get out there and at least have a chance to get out there on first day of rifle season.
Right.
You still have many places in Pennsylvania schools that allow that Monday. So they got the Monday, but now they've got that Saturday. Now, imagine if we were to get Sunday hunting in there.
Yeah.
Then you talk about what's happened in the decline of hunters going to the north central part of the state. They say, well, there's just not as many deer. Now, there's plenty of deer in north central Pennsylvania. I spend way too much time up there. Some absolutely knock your socks off deer hunting in that part of the state. But at gas being over $3, about $3 a gallon, am I going to go up for one day?
Right.
I'm not. Not when I've got so much deer where I live in Harrisburg and I've access to Lebanon and all those other kinds. I got tons of deer down there. But for me to go up there just for a day, spend all that money on gas just to hunt one day, now I understand the discussions around the tradition because the camps, they meet with another camp and they do those things. I think that's more of a generational change too, in that, I'm a hunter. When I'm going out, I love to see my buddies that belong to the deer camp. I belong to a state lease camp, traditional deer camp. Love getting to see those guys. I see them throughout the year. We have meetings about quarterly. We go up for work days and we do all these things. But when I want to go up there, I want to hunt.
Right.
I'm not going up there to drink and play cards and tell stories. I'm there because I love to hunt and I want to be out in the woods.
Yep.
And in fact, what's ironic's not the good word. What's interesting to me about the Saturday opener, just from a personal standpoint, my son, as I mentioned before, we turkey hunted. We didn't get a chance to really do much deer hunting. This Saturday will be the first day he'll be able to ever deer hunt with me.
Nice.
In his 25 years of life. He lives in North Carolina. He'll be able to come up for Thanksgiving.
It's great.
We'll probably spend Friday fall turkey hunting. We'll go to camp. We'll go ahead and hunt on Saturday, and then he has time now to get back to North Carolina because he's got a new job with no time off.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's awesome.
so that's why it was put in place, and we're going to monitor closely. This was probably the most hotly debated, discussed topic I've ever seen our board members, our commissioners discuss. There was a lot of heartache. There was a lot of review. There was a lot of looking at this. And we're going to be monitoring it very close through survey work. We're going to be surveying to see what impact is this actually having on deer hunting. Because we don't, we understand the folks that say their traditions have been harmed. Some of their traditions are, I went to Ohio and I hunted Saturday and Sunday, and then I come to Pennsylvania on Monday. And I get that. And, I can really sympathize with the out-of-state hunters saying, I get up there and I go for Thanksgiving. I don't have much time to get over there. Or I live in Ohio and have Thanksgiving in Ohio. For me to get to Pennsylvania, it's tough. Any change that the agency ever makes helps some people and hurts other people. So we're going to be looking at this very closely. But our commissioners put a whole lot of time to do this, and they wanted to do it for the right reason. I think it's going to be very successful. And in fact, our first 4 days of license sales have been higher than I've ever seen them.
Oh, wow.
In the last 4 days.
Really?
That's great.
Yeah, I just looked at them first 4 days. Just the general hunting license, which is the one I look at probably the most, is up 25%.
Wow.
So
That's great.
Over last year. So why is it that? I'm not going to say it's Saturday opener. I'm not going to say I don't know. But
it could
it's
also
very
just be.
interesting.
It could also just be that we've been talking about it a lot.
Yeah,
right. You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
like it's getting press. Right. People are thinking about hunting again. It's kind of at the forefront of the conversation for people who have any type of hunting interest.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bo.
I was just going to say, I never used to buy my hunting license right when they first came out. Like, I always just waited right before to put the doe tags in. I'd run and hurry up and pick it up because I was running late, and this year, for some reason, I'm like, oh, there was a lot of press on it. And I got emails and game commission and everything. This is going on, and the elk changes that season, which is a whole nother topic. And I was like, oh, I better get my license, so I bought it earlier than I normally would.
Right. My tradition is usually the 4th of July is when I go, because I'm usually back home. And so I usually take me and my daughter go to the small hardware store in our hometown while we're visiting family, and we go pick up our hunting license is usually like the tradition. But I wanted to say something about tradition, right? Because I think that we use that word a lot as hunters and as a community. But I think that we sometimes get lost in what it actually means. Tradition doesn't necessarily mean that something stays the same, right? Tradition, like anything else, is meant to evolve.
Or does it cover everybody?
Or does it cover
traditions
everybody?
Are individual.
Right. So it's like I think that when we talk about tradition as hunters, like we have to understand that we shouldn't be so selfish as to want to hold it in one place, right? We talk about, I'm a dad, right? So people out there that don't have kids, maybe they won't be able to relate, but looking at Bo with his rut stash, that thing might get you some kids, man. I'm just saying. It's my daughter's getting older. She's 10, right? When I say older, but she's turning into like a little person, like it's like her personality is defined. Like she's got things that are important to her and stuff like that. And as a dad, like I just want to hold her so close and not let her get too far away because I don't want anything to change. I still miss the days, even though there were miserable days when she was little and I was changing her diapers and feeding her and giving her a bath and all that stuff, right? And I couldn't wait until she got old enough to do all those things herself. And everyone out there listening, I promise I'm going to make a hunting point here in a second. But now that she's not asking me to do those things or need those things anymore, I kind of miss it, right? And as she's getting older and I'm getting older and thinking about these things, it's like I recognize that my job has changed. My job has changed from one of like constant care to constant guidance. And I think if we look at hunting that way, that our job is not constant care and holding it in the one place. Our job really as hunters is to provide constant guidance, to always make sure that we are protecting the group as a whole and expanding it as much as we can, so everyone gets to enjoy, or as many people as possible get the opportunity to enjoy the things that we've enjoyed for so long as folks who've hunted since they were kids, right? And so that's kind of how I look at it. It's like, don't try to hold it in one place because it's like trying to hold water. It'll never happen, and you'll end up ruining it for other people and probably for yourself at some point. But just appreciate it, watch it grow, watch it adapt, and be the change that you want to see in it.
Because traditions are different from anybody. There's a camp culture in North Central Pennsylvania, has a tradition of its own, very unique, and I am part of that culture as well. But there's individual cultures. I know people that they wait for first day of small game. They may go out and hunt pheasants. They get their kids and that's what they do. And traditions change through time. And with changing in your family dynamics, my son, I couldn't wait till youth spring turkey day. I mean, that was my tradition that we developed. And then he went and grew up on me.
Right.
So.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we covered a lot of ground. We've been on here for about an hour. I want to be sensitive to your time because I know you got some other responsibilities and some priorities to take care of today.
I just appreciate you having me on here and talking about hunting and conservation. Doesn't get any better than that unless it was more turkey hunting.
We need truth from something else that goes with turkey hunting for the podcast that Bryan would be into,
All right, Bryan. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.